Good morning, West End. I missed so many of y'all on Christmas Eve. I got to see some folks on Christmas morning for pajama church, which was just so wonderful. But I was down in Texas visiting my family. It had been 3 years since we'd gotten to do Christmas together, and unsurprisingly, I got immediately drafted to help out with my home church's Christmas pageant as well. But it really was a wonderful Christmas, and it looked like a good, if not frigid one, here at West End too. As it always does, taking the time and space away from New York brought a lot of things to my mind. All over, we are all in the process of rebuilding after the harshest days of the pandemic. But that process looks different everywhere, because in a sense, we're all rebuilding somewhat different things. The pandemic looked different in Austin, and recovery does too. Now, my awareness of those differences is part of why Isaiah has seemed so different to me this Advent and Christmas season. Growing up, I only understood the book of Isaiah through the lens of prophecy as prediction, because that's how us Christians usually engage that text around Christmas time. And this picture of Isaiah as a sort of Nostradamus figure formed in my brain, and that's pretty much what I thought the book was good for a long time. I didn't encounter the idea of prophet as critic or prophet as rabble-rouser until much later. Now, without getting too bogged down in the details of it, I suppose the 30-second history lesson is that the book of Isaiah includes a few different sections from a few different time periods with different authors. Today's reading comes from the chunk of time where the Jewish people, their Babylonian captives conquered by another king, were finally allowed to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the city from which they had been exiled long ago. And it's in that context that I read Isaiah now, rebuilding, yearning for something lost, but seeing what's possible, grappling with the ways that the guts and systems of a community directly lead to the justice or injustice that we produce. Sound familiar? I mean, doesn't that sound like us? And it gives me great comfort to tell you the truth that the way God recognizes this people as God's own is that they are children who will not deal falsely. I struggle often with the great gap between what needs to be done and what I am capable of doing. And I know, in theory, that the strength of God resides in that gap. But chalk it up to my middle child syndrome, I just find it difficult at times to suppress the narrative that I'm tasked with fixing everything. But when I hear Isaiah identify honesty as one of the cornerstones for belonging to God, I am arrested. This is something I can do, something I can handle. And it seems it's an invitation we give to God to join us, to save us with God's own presence. So then what of the gospel reading? It's certainly one of the more dramatic moments in the Christmas story, and not in a fun way. And there's so much we could say about it. But holding these two readings together, what jumps out to me is hearing Isaiah's line that it was no messenger or angel, but his presence that saved him. And then immediately reading the story of exactly the opposite, an angel saving Mary, Jesus, and Joseph with a message. Now, what's different between these two moments? What's changed to make God want to communicate differently? Sure, we could ascribe it all to the fact that this is Jesus, God's own son, but is it sufficient to simply point to this VIP status? Do we suppose that God loves Jesus more than God's other children? I don't think that's how love works, in a sort of hierarchical, zero-sum fashion. So, walk with me as I think this through. All right, for starters, there's a huge difference between the people in positions of power to whom Isaiah spoke and Matthew's description of poor folks on the run from a violent, self-obsessed governor. Think of it. To even be in the position where you feel like you have a hand in determining how a society is rebuilt is a gift of much control and much opportunity. It doesn't mean you control everything, but Isaiah was speaking to people who had a hand on the steering wheel, people whom he was calling to task for the directions they leaned as their choices determined the safety and well-being of folks who were only able to watch from the back seat, hoping that there would be a place for them at the table being built. Isaiah seems to say, we have experienced scarcity, we have experienced distress and oppression, but let us remember that we have been brought out from it, and let us live honestly so that the God who dwells among us will now help turn our imperfect solutions into something greater, something redeemed. But there are no such qualifiers for Mary and Joseph, and it's kind of obvious why, right? They don't have a hand on the steering wheel of society. They're not even watching from the back seat. If anything, they're seeing the headlights turn on them, scared immigrants in the desert just trying to survive. To them appears the boldest, brightest, most audacious message from God. I want you to live. You thirst for justice, if not simply safety. And though these things may seem impossibly out of reach, for now, it is enough to survive. Trust me. So, in which story do we find ourselves today? In which story do you, the person created in God's image, find yourself? Now, I should be clear that I'm not implying any sort of hierarchy between these two kinds of interactions with God. I just find it a helpful distinction, probably because my own faith involves a lot more pondering in God's quiet presence than angelic messages. But have you ever wished that God would send you a clearer, brighter, bolder message? Have you ever felt that yearning, one that feels almost ungrateful to express because you know God's presence? But it's been so long since a bolt leapt from the blue and into your heart. I know I have. Now, lest it seem like I'm trying to establish a set of rules or a system of predictability for talking with God, let me end this with a personal story. 2022 was a big year for Greg Abbott, governor of my dear home state of Texas, in his years-long campaign to make weapons out of desperate immigrants. And I should say that an earlier draft of this sermon involved a very long Herod Abbott comparison, but I think I'll leave that tirade to your own imaginations. Now, this cruelty was nothing new, but Abbott's practice of deceiving those who ask for help and busing them to cities with whom he has beef was certainly a significant escalation. As a Texas boy who will go to his grave believing we can and will do better, this has been exceptionally heartbreaking for me. I feel such a strong sense of responsibility for what goes on down there, and yet I feel called to work in this great city of New York right now. So here I have remained, sitting in God's presence, feeling God's ferocity at this injustice, yet stuck, wondering how to bridge the gap. About a month ago, a group of young men from Venezuela started making regular appearances at our own Tuesday table meals. My Spanish is miserable, if existent at all, so I confess I don't know the details of their journey. All I know is that they're kind, grateful, and always seem to have a laugh on their lips. Now, in addition to the meals at Tuesday table, we've been picking up donated sneakers from a running store over on Amsterdam and getting them on feet. These are donations from folks who've just bought new running shoes and are discarding the old ones, and as such, they come in a huge variety of condition and sizes. But I had marked down a size 9 for a regular Tuesday table attendee, and this particular week, I was so excited to bring back a literally shiny, new as could be pair of black and white Hokas. If you don't know, they're a brand of running shoe. Now, they looked great, and I knew this guy was going to be thrilled. And sure enough, they fit him perfectly, and he was beaming. I swear, I couldn't have turned away for more than 2 minutes, and when I came back outside, the guy was already back in his ratty old shoes. And I'm sure you've already guessed what happened. I walked over to find him chatting with the Venezuelan fellows, one of them wearing those Hokas, and all of them laughing about a joke that I'd missed. When I asked the first guy about it later, he just smiled and said they needed him more. It's not the same as an angel telling me to run, but my heart caught such a bolt in that moment that there might as well have been trumpets blowing. To each of you, on this first day of the new year, I humbly offer this little bit of advice. If you find yourself needing something other than a quiet presence, if you're thirsting for something louder, brighter, more electric from God, go to where the lightning flies, where people with so little manage to give so much. Align yourself with the poor by making their problems your own, by strengthening the bonds of love that hold us all together and through which God reaches. Maybe I'll see you there.